Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Why It Matters. My name is Tracy Kronzak. I'm Director of Innovation at Now It Matters, and I'm joined here always by my stalwart compatriot, Tim.
Hey, everybody. Welcome.
We are... Oh, see, Tim, you just made me give my whole title, rank, name, and Tim's the founder and CEO of Now It Matters.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Founder, CEO, janitor. Don't forget janitor. It's on there. It's the only one people notice. So yeah, there we go.
That's an easier one of late, right? Because it's just your house.
Well, it is hotly contested by members of Now It Matters that live in my house and say, I'm not sure that's true. So with that, we can move on.
Yeah, we're recording this now on the middle of December. As you can see, the technological setup just keeps getting better and better. The background keeps getting better and better. I have this mic, which connotes some kind of importance. I'm not sure what. But the real story for today is we are joined here with a long-term friend, Lori Freeman. And Lori, I will let you introduce yourself before we kick off conversation, because I'm super glad to have you here.
Me too. Thank you so much. I'm excited to have this conversation with you guys. I sort of wish we were filming or taping something once a week so that we could continue to cuss and discuss some of these things, because I find myself thinking like, okay, wait, no, we only have this much time. So anyway, thanks for the introduction, I guess. So I am Lori Freeman. I currently am with Salesforce, where I lead the nonprofit industry solutions and strategy team. Have been bouncing around the Salesforce world for a long time, but have been bouncing around nonprofit technology for more than 2 decades, and really think of it as my life's purpose. So yeah, thanks for the chance to be here and chat with you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for making it your life purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really. Well, you guys have this, I feel like, as though you both have as well. So, and that's part of the, really the blessing of doing a lot of this work, is you get to meet cool people who make you rethink things and make you reevaluate. All right, am I doing the best work that I can do? Because I see that person doing the best work they can do, and who doesn't want to do that?
And this is like a great opportunity to say, I've known Lori since before you even joined Salesforce, and I was a consultant, and you were working for Convio in Emeryville.
Yeah.
But true story, and then I'm going to turn it over to start the conversation here. Lori has always been the person in my life and career when like Tracy gets aggravated by something, which I think everybody in this world has seen publicly for 15 years now-ish. Like when Tracy gets aggravated by something, Tracy goes on a warpath, and Lori's always been the person who's called me up and be like, meet me at the Starbucks at 7 a.m. in downtown San Francisco, and we'll talk about this. And I love that about you, Lori, and I love what it says to your commitment to this world. And I think the same thing that has always been true about those conversations is where I want to start us for today, and that is, it is 2020. We have had a brutal year. And we are still asking ourselves the question, when it comes to nonprofit technology, why is this so hard? And what do we need to do to make it less hard, particularly in the journey to 2030?
Yeah, it's the, I think that's the question. Well, actually, first of all, because you've now let the cat out of the bag, that I will call you behind the scenes and say, like, meet behind the third tree at midnight, knock on the thing.
Bring a bag of silver and a small potion.
This is getting like really particular. I'm starting to think like there actually is a third tree here. So
there's a secret code.
There's an Illuminati thing happening.
I think why I'm pulled in to do this work is, and why I like to have those kinds of conversations one-off. I think most of the people who I know, or for sure the people that I love and feel fortunate to be loved by, would say that I'm an extrovert. But I think that what I've always gotten the most out of is one-on-one conversations where you can just, I listen by asking a lot of questions, or I'm a deeply curious person. So I've often found that when folks like you sort of raise the alarm that there's probably something that's off course. And one of the things I've loved about working in the nonprofit technology ecosystem is that the motivations that folks have for raising the alarm are usually because they're trying to do something good, right? Like the way they're doing it may be messed up, but the reason that they're doing it for is usually shared purpose or shared values. So anyways, that's what's called me into doing this work. But your question of why is this so hard is actually the thing I think that also got me into working with technology for nonprofits. And I wish it was as simple as one answer. When I think about when I started working with nonprofits, and I'm a person who always, was tried to be active in my community, and really just always got a lot of fulfillment out of helping others, and thought I wanted to be a social worker, and kind of went down a path early in the late 90s to get my master's in social work, and worked with a large nonprofit, and realized that technology was a force multiplier, which I'm going to try very hard not to use jargon during this conversation today, because I'm sometimes accused of that by family, of using too much corporate jargon. But anyways, I saw technology as a force multiplier, and I thought, oh, I want to be on that side of solutioning, right? Like I want to be on that side of helping folks at scale, because this large nonprofit I worked for struggled so much to use technology. And I thought it was as simple as, oh, we just didn't know how to use the naive, like mid-20s Lori thought, oh, we just don't know how to use the technology. And I, like my view now is none of this is really about technology. It's about where we've chosen to make investments. It's about the space that people have to innovate, and technology is an important part of that, but it's not the most important part, right? And these are the toughest problems in the world, and there's not frameworks that are around a lot of it. There's not a single question or requirement that's looking to be fulfilled. So all sorts of thoughts and ideas about makes it really hard, but it's not the technology. So unfortunately, I think it's a lot harder than that. What do you guys think?
I literally just said, in a client conversation last week with an organization that, for whatever weird reason, this is an organization that's also threaded in and out of my career over the past 10 years as well. I know a few of the folks over there really well. Huge, high-profile organization. And I actually literally just said to them the same thing. I said, here's the thing. 5 years ago, 8 years ago, when I was talking with you all, I would have been more convinced that what you need is X, Y, and Z and A, B, and C technological solutions. And I think what I'm going to tell you now in 2020, after particularly the journey I've had over the past 3 to 4 years, is yes, you may need X, Y, and Z technological solution, but what you actually need is your own internal motivation and desire to change around this. Otherwise, you're going to spend a boat of money to make this change and wind up exactly where you are right now in 3 years. So what's your motivation to change, and why now? Because if you're motivated, we want to work with you. And if you're not, we can't help you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so often the impetus to making changes with technology is it's a moving target, right? So like people change all the time because something's up for renewal, or there's a new leader in the organization, or there's a really pervasive pain that there's a sense of, well, if we just change this one thing, right? Like, one of the things that I like about working around platforms, and that's really changed my thinking, is, I think the jobs that you hire software to do are poorly understood in the nonprofit space, to be honest, right? Like, I think if I look at some work that I've done with other folks in the space over the last year or two, there's a ton of solutions out there that you think of as, here's what you use for volunteer management, here's what you use for donor management. I don't get interested in the causes that I think about because I want to be a donor, or because I want to be a volunteer. Yes, I want to donate. Yes, I want to volunteer. But I give of my time, I give of my financial resources because there's some result that I want to create. Those aren't the solutions that are sold off the shelf right now, right?
Yeah.
So like the problems that organizations are having are experience problems. They're having engagement problems, right? Like, and the way that philanthropy is consumed, or the way that we like give of our time and resources, like that's just not, those all seem like ethereal concepts, right? But like the amount of times, and you guys both had probably the same experience, the amount of times that I've responded to an organization that's looking for a donation management solution or looking for a fundraising database or looking for a donor database. It's like, what is that even? That's not, or the amount of times that people create journeys for donors. Like, it's your motivation. Jan Catterley, I don't know if either of you have worked with Jan Catterley, but she gave me this aha. Yeah, she just gave me this aha moment around it where I was like, oh, this is so simple. Why is this, the whole sector built around this all the wrong way? So it's really freaking hard.
I actually wanted to say, I think two things are at play on that, and they're both related to messaging or marketing. Mm-hmm. So one is the marketing that Philanthropy puts out there is off. It's off in two regards. One is it focuses on altruism rather than investment. So that's going to focus on bake sale, low level, rather than you need to see a result that's measurable. So that's one thing that I think Philanthropy has in the past not done as well at.
Dead on.
And I want to be really, really careful here. I'm really pro Philanthropy. I think all the work is great. So we're criticizing things that are already well done. And I just want to be like, you know, that's one thing. The other thing is the incredible misfortune of focusing on dollars to kids. And, you know, 100% of your donation goes to XYZ outcome, instead of actually prepping for, we can't do a quality job and kids need a quality job done. And so we need the infrastructure to do it well. Those two messages on the Philanthropy side. And then I hope that this is okay for me to raise on the platform side, but platform marketing has put out a narrative that this is easy because without it, it's hard to sell. And I think that actually becomes a huge barrier, because part of what's going on there is the focus on implement technology as a solution. And I think, you know, here we've been exploring a lot, digging into what does it mean to implement change and manage technology. And we run into platform marketing where that message is actually sales friction. And yet at the same time, what we're finding is that if you remessage around, hey, what you really need is to break this down into functions of technology. Here's a theory of change for you. And then this is going to take a while because technology can move fast, but humans can't. And this needs to get at the human level. So we've built our services around that model of implementing change and then onboarding the right technology to accomplish that. And I think what we're finding is that has made a big difference. But it really is out. I mean, I'd be very open to you telling me that you don't see it the same way. So please do, which I know you will. But I do think that marketing push that's come from platforms has really pushed towards like the magic is the technology itself, instead of, you know, really this is hard work that you have to do organizationally, and you can get there with the right technology. Does that make sense? Am I?
It does, yeah. And when I think about because I've more than once in my life had responsibility as part of my title or job description for marketing things. When I learned the definition of content marketing and watched the work that HubSpot has done over the years, and just really just been like blown away by the way they have approached the market and addressed the market through content as utility, right? Like, as I learned about that and like through a textbook definition and thought about like, oh, well, that's not a new thing. It's a new thing to call it something, and to lean into the process of how you give the folks that are considering working with you information. Like, there was sort of like a watershed moment for me of like, that's how all things should be for how individuals are considering using your solutions. So that's not, it's not a light switch thing that you can do, because that's not how software in the nonprofit industry, or even services in the nonprofit industry, or even human capital, that's not how it's consumed, right? So like, there's this like, it's like a moving target, and maybe they're coming closer together, right? Like, so like platform tries to make it seem like it is easy through marketing. Well, it is easier than if you went and built it all on your own, right? So that's not true, right? So, but anyways, like, I appreciate that the observation of how sometimes that's feels gross, I guess. So, but what I'll say is, I think that the altruism versus philanthropy, I think the best experiences that you have are the places where as a consumer or user, you don't stop and think about what am I using to do it. It's just so part of your habit, right? So like when I dream about a world that's different for nonprofits, I don't dream about a world where I've been at Salesforce for 8 years. I don't dream about a world where a person wakes up and thinks of Salesforce. That's not what I'm dreaming about. I'm thinking about a world where they wake up and they actually have the information they need to do their work better, or they have insight into something that their organization is trying to achieve that they can stop doing, right? Like I had an organization tell me a few years ago, I was working on a success story a few years ago, and I called back into the person who was the head of the particular initiative inside the organization and said, hey, I just want to make sure I have this right. You went from, it used to take you 14 weeks to do this, and now it takes you 24 hours or something like that. And they're like, no, where do you have that? And I was like, oh, I knew that couldn't be right. Like, and they were like, no, but it actually takes us now. And I don't remember now what the difference was, but it was a difference. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. Well, yeah, I definitely want to change that. I'm glad that I called. And the reason I called to double check it is because it set off an alarm bell for me. And I felt immediate disappointment for, it's not as fast as we had hoped for when we were going through this. And the person was like, no, you don't understand. Before we actually chose to implement technology around this area, we had no idea how long it took. And it was this moment of like,
measured because it's because the opportunity cost is invisible.
So then like, if you ask yourself the question, like, how do you go tell others about that success? Like, and say like, they actually know now how long it takes to do something. Yeah. That is not something that most organizations have enough like long-term planning and insight around the result they're trying to create. So like, Tim, you said theory of change, like I'm so, like in the dorkiest way, I'm so excited when I hear someone use the language of change and the language of monitoring and evaluation. And because it's something that like has really been absent of a lot of conversations in our sector outside of the meal folks, right? And there should just be a single thread throughout every conversation in your organization of this is the result we're trying to create. This is how my work works towards that, right? Like it's just to me, and that's something that like when I worked at that large organization in the 90s, I thought we had a technology problem, that we didn't know how to use the technology. And I remember sitting there thinking, how can we tell if what we're even doing is working? And I thought, really, I mean, I knew there were I knew there were politics always, right? Of course. But I really thought like, oh, surely somebody, I'm just not senior enough, right? Somebody somewhere knows what we're trying to do, and they know how that's going to be measured. And they're working backwards from how we should make changes each year. So like I really
20-year-olds.
I know, right? Like
such a wonderful assumption there.
Yeah. And now like I see it really is. It's not. I actually think like just being able to see what you're working towards is such an important part of it, and that there's change that needs to happen to make that real. But I think the hardest thing is that there's no space for failure in the nonprofit sector. There's no space for it. Like,
oh God,
there's no space.
That's well said. I haven't really thought about that. Yeah.
Like how can you iterate and change if you don't even have a baseline, right? Like like anything basic, like your budget, your diet, your health, any of those things, like you can establish a baseline of like, here's how I'm doing against that. So you can see it, right? Like Kevin, a former colleague of mine who you guys know well, Kevin Bromer, and I years ago in his basement in Baltimore, I was like, just emphatically saying like, I want organizations to be able to see themselves in their data, meaning, I've met with these and worked with these fundraisers who they'd say, I want to be able to, pull this out of the database, and I can't. And I had this woman, it was like 15 years ago in San Antonio. She could literally say, like, if I said, who are the 10 people who have given you, $1,000 every year for the last, she could knew their name, knew their spouse, knew their kids, knew their dog, knew everything, but she couldn't log it into her system. Right. So,
oh my gosh.
Like see yourself in the data is I look in the database and I see it and go, yes, that's right. Versus what you guys have seen, what I've seen a million times is you're sitting with someone, they look somebody up in whatever system they're in and they go, this isn't right. I don't know why it says that right now. Right. So like to me, phase one is like, you can see yourself in the data, which enables you to get to phase two, which is I can actually draw reports that I have confidence in. Phase three in my mind is like, now I can automate some of this stuff, right? Because like my systems are working together well enough. And then like this like crazy world is like predict stuff, right? Like, and be able to like prescribe things that you want to make, like all that stuff.
Have we talked you through our model before, by the way? I'm just.
No, do you have see, I'm not really, I shouldn't admit this out loud on anything that's going to be shared publicly, but I'm not great at thinking through frameworks. So like
No,
I was the kid
you're
that
just
could do the
nailing.
math but couldn't show my work. Like I could say like I know the right number is
totally.
17, but I couldn't tell you how I got there. I didn't know. I don't know. I still don't.
Well,
What's your
Lori,
model?
Tim's gonna probably pull up the diagram. Yeah. Like, I don't know. Do you want to
Sure.
pull up the diagram? I don't know.
Yeah,
I
totally
think we
glad
show
to.
this once in a while during calls, but while he's doing that, like, there are these two things that are true, right? You have these micro constructs around how every organization is behaving, right? And that's what we're talking about here. It's like, how is my organization able to do this better, stronger, faster, right? You have the meta constructs in which these organizations are operating. And those are kind of loosely defined as you have philanthropy, you have technology and all of the things that fall under it, including platforms and you name it. And then you have sort of all the assumptions and people that go behind that. And I think I am so glad this is the last recording that we're putting out this year, because 2020 has been the year where I think the whole world realized that the assumptions we put behind things are not actually true.
Yeah.
And it cuts across the board, right? So like to sort of the kibitzing we were doing before we hit record, it's like every one of these things made assumptions about how nonprofits are served through those structures. Be it like Tim's comment about philanthropy and charity, like, well, that was philanthropy started because rich people had big feels, right? And that set off a whole industry that actually doesn't serve what organizations and people need on the ground. And only now, like in the 2010s and the 2020s, are we revisiting that truly from the ground up. You know, technology is the same thing. Like, I haven't worked with a single technology company that didn't say nonprofits are another vertical in our sales structure and we will treat them accordingly. And that's just wrong. Like, they're not. They're their own thing. And it goes back to the fact that nonprofits aren't beholden to shareholders, they're beholden to communities and stakeholders, right? And same with like people and operating around it, like that transformational moment where it was like, wait, throwing new things at this is not going to change the underlying issues. You know, I'm trying to tee you up actually here, Tim, a little bit, but like, you know, how do we stop that frenetic cycle of like just glomming onto new things when, by the way, new things are falling into these other structures that create this can't fail context? And it's just, it creates this quagmire of things that need bigger entities to come together and think together differently before we re-engage in the same cycle of things leading up to 2030. I don't know. Call me crazy. Call me an optimist.
There's so many things that you just said, right? Like, and Tim's like, let me get a word in here, but like, there's like,
no, that's how it is internally too.
Oh, no. It's the right conversation to have. But I think that you said so many things, but I'm going to pick two things to respond to. The level of cynicism around philanthropy. Like, I don't know if I share the same, like,
I'm very cynical, but please make me more optimistic.
No, I will just say this. Like, I've had the benefit of working with a bunch of different groups of people, because I've worked at about a few different companies that serve nonprofits, and all those companies had partners, and all those companies had customer groups and all those things. And like, you know, like I think what you just characterized 2020 as maybe the ultimate year of the loss of any innocence, right? Right. But like, I think that I don't have the same cynicism around philanthropy, because in every one of those organizations, I know there are people just like the three of us who at like on any given day are betting more than their 9 to 5 on, man, we could do so much good, right? So like, and they're beating themselves up at night and sacrificing time with their friends or family or kids, or even individual time to take care of themselves to try to figure out how to do this work. Like, I think humans, I want to live it, even though 2020 was definitely the year of the loss of innocence for me, I still want to live in a space where I have hope for that there are people out there who are really trying to do the best they can with the resources they have. So anyways, Tim's going to like bring us back to it through a structure here. You have this beautiful
Wait, what was
slide.
the other thing you wanted to respond to though? You were like, don't be so cynical about philanthropy, but what was the other thing?
Well, I just think like, like benefit of the doubt, like the things that we're asking folks to do, like, when I first learned about, when I heard the Dan Pallotta TED talk, I thought,
Yep.
okay, he's named it, right? Like he's named it. And I read about the starvation cycle and
Yep.
it's this many years later. And I don't feel I spoke with you guys recently about like disruption in the status quo. Like I meet and work with and have people in my life all the time who start from this default position of, well, but it's a nonprofit. And it's like, well, but it's like World Health. Well, but it's gender equity. Well, but it's the planet. Like what is this but bullshit? Like, why do we start from this place of the things that are the hardest problems to solve are supposed to be doing it in the scrappiest ways? Like, so
yes,
and I know you evangelize that stuff too. Like, I think like it's that stuff. So like when I say like there's no room to fail, like it's because there's no room to experiment, right? And you're not going to get to solutions. Like I like technology because you actually can follow a methodical path usually to, well, if I just keep trying, like we're going to eventually figure this out. That's not how global health is. That's not how hunger is. That's not how conservation is. Like we will never in anyone's lifetime figure those things out completely in a way that we go, well, we're healthy enough as a people. Where things are equal enough, like that doesn't exist, right? So like they're really juicy meaty problems. I'm all over the map now. Tim's like, we got to rein her in.
Oh, I love it.
No, I love it.
I'll say this too. So this is our theory of change. Really quick: data, then information, then insight. If you dig in deep, you can see there's connections to staff at the data layer, and if you don't do that right, the rest falls apart. So you've got to get reporting to directors and you've got to get insights up to executives. Here's the thing I've been thinking in the background while we're all talking is that I name philanthropy and marketing from platforms, but I don't think they're at fault. I think that is them doing their jobs. I think who's at
for
fault
sure. For sure.
Implementation partners. And here's why I want to lay it there. It's our job to know our field. It's a platform's job to highlight their tool. And what we've done for way too long is just say, we implement this platform instead of saying that platform's part of a bigger plan and we need to actually help you form a bigger plan independent of what tool you're using. There's been way too much, of our work that focuses on, the right tool instead of looking at this and saying, okay, let's get a technology strategy in place so that you can measure anything. Yeah. Then let's look at the way that you manage what goals you're trying to accomplish. And then at the top level, what's your strategy for accomplishing those? So I think the blame on this really falls to, if there is any, and whatever, I think it really is that implementers have not claimed the space to say, it's our job to lead here. And we do that with our clients' best interest in mind and the tools that work best with them. And because of that, here's our theory of change that we go, that we move towards. I think that is a very different approach and is really needed.
It is a different approach. And I think you're brave to go try to lead from that position. And I'm hopeful because there's other individuals and organizations that are thinking like that, not as many as you would hope for. But I think the reason that you don't see more of that is because there has to be space, there has to be leadership inside the sector that creates space and agency and ultimately budget for that, right? Like that goes back to where we started the conversation where I was saying, well, I've responded to a lot of RFPs and RFIs or just, calls for, we need a new donor database. And that's kind of the wrong question, right? So
it's interesting you raised Jan because we've recently worked with Jan to on a couple of places. And what I'm finding is actually this gets at the heart so much faster if you're presenting it this way. And a lot of it is saying, doesn't matter this technology, we need more tortoise and less hare. We need quit chasing quick wins and start looking at, winning the race. And if that takes a couple of years, let's say that up front and do the hard licks now. And I think more and more the industry is now more alert to when you're just dressing up to look good for the interview and you're not actually conveying accurate long-term information about what it's going to take.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's why it's the consultant's job to say, we're here to actually lead you in this engagement on where you want to go at a destination level, not just which tool to implement.
Yeah. One of the two things. One of the smartest things that an individual that worked for a very large organization a while ago said to me a few years ago, that's just like, I think about it all the time. She was talking about the difference between how you think about digital and how you think about like automation and all those things. And she was like, it's the craziest thing. The organizations that I work with who ask me, do you think we should have a chief digital officer? She was like, nobody's asked me yet about the chief paper officer. And it was just this moment of like, oh yeah, why do we do that, right? And I thought that about innovation, right? Like, because I'd had so many arguments over the years with different folks in UX and product management and things where they're like, we're going to create an innovation group. And then what would follow is conversations around like, but if you only have 2 people responsible for innovation, what are the other 98 people out of the 100? Shouldn't everybody be responsible for innovation? It's the same conversation as like, well, what do you do about culture? Does the top of the organization set culture? Does the bottom of the organization? Everybody always like points the other way, right? So I think the combination of that awareness of like most of the digital work that I've seen happen in this sector has come through fundraising, and that's makes sense, right? But it's actually not probably where the greatest purpose and result can come from, right? Like, like everybody takes issue with, or everybody was quick to point out, oh, we keep track of our major donors in Excel or whatever, or oh, we keep track of whatever in a spreadsheet. That's also where most of our missions are being tracked.
Exactly.
So it's like,
completely agree. What's your core contribution here?
How would you be able to see patterns? How would you be able to say like, we do this program after school for kids every day for the same? So it's just this language of like theory of change, like you guys saying theory of change. Like when I learned about all of those constructs, like I was like, oh, there's a whole discipline around this that's outside of the scientific community, where some nonprofits are evidence-based and some organizations do have a theory of change and logic models and all this stuff. So I started saying it when I would present in a room full of folks. And I will tell you, like when I would use those words, or still when I use those words with fundraisers, marketers, C-suite, outside of folks that are M&E in the United States, it's largely a room full of folks that go, I don't know what that is. But I had a chance to present in Amsterdam last year, and I said, how many folks in this room, and it was mostly executives that support nonprofits, how many folks in this room know what your theory of change is, understand how your logic model fits into that, and throughout most of your organization can tie the choices that you make back to it? And 75% of the room raised their hand. It was bizarre. Like I said to Komar afterwards, did you see that? Like what? Why did that happen? No, but I mean, like
it's a different model of funding, measurement, and operation over there. And I know that because I mean, I spent 6 months over there essentially doing stuff. All right. I want to reflect back. If you have time for it, I want to reflect back one question because we're all touching on facets of it. And I have to ask all of us, we've both said, or we've all said in some way, shape, or form, there's a different responsibility now. So what is, let's look at those buckets. Let's look at technology. Let's look at philanthropy. Let's look at implementation partners like you've talked on, Tim. Let's look at nonprofits. What's the new responsibility that we all need to take into account beginning January 2021? Like, what is that? What are the new ways that we need to be responsible in service to this greater mission? Because I have to say, like, I've reached the point in my career where I'm just like, if I can't connect something of what I'm doing to saving the world, I don't know if I can connect what I'm doing to what I'm doing anymore. So I want to know, where are our responsibilities now? What's the new responsibility of all of those entities?
It's a good question. And I probably have a different answer as an individual versus as a professional, and the responsibility of like a platform company.
I'd give up my answer to hear both of yours, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay. As an individual, I think it's actually, and I've been reminded of this so many times in the last year, as for a number of different reasons, personal and some professional. Like, number one is just use your voice, right? Like there's so many conversations right now around equity where folks are so afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. And, you know, I'm a lesbian that grew up in the Midwest. I've spent a lot of my life using my voice for things where I was at the least amount of risk, right? So, like, I'm a person who's not afraid to use my voice, but I've realized in the last year, as I had conversations with friends and family members about things that I'm uncomfortable with in the world, that I didn't always use my voice to say, that's not okay.
Mm.
Right. So I
Mhm.
was no, not unknowingly, yeah, I guess unknowingly, like I just hadn't considered it. I was creating space for things to happen that I'm not comfortable with, right? So like I just use your voice, right? So for me, how that works in this work is, you know, like, you know, we all have opportunities to influence how individuals and organizations make investments in their organization, and making time to have conversations and say, like, you know, have you talked to this organization because they did the exact same thing? Or have you talked to this person? Or can I help you think that through? Like, I've had conversations everywhere I've ever worked with individuals and organizations where I've said, tried to help steer towards, you're at this point where you're making this decision. And I think you should, if I were you, I'd think through this thing. And it's usually stuff where you can see, like, I can see, because I've worked with enough organizations that are in at this crossroads like you are, that you're about to make this choice that's really not the longest term brightest thing. So use your voice, right? Which means using our experiences. And you both have incredible voices and experiences, and you know, like you seem to step into that really well. So, but I bet there's places where you're not, because I just think it's hard work to keep doing. So I'll just encourage you guys both to keep using your voice, and when I need it, encourage me to use mine, right? From a platform perspective, to me, the place where I still get excited to get out of bed every day, and where sometimes I can't sleep because I'm so excited because I want us to get it right, where I think platforms fit into that, or large organizations like Salesforce, where I work right now, fit in, is it's not enough to create a product. It's got to be much bigger than that. Like an organization like Salesforce, and I could list all the other large organizations that do in this, you have to be working together, and you have to be creating space for your employees to do the best work. You have to hold yourself accountable to creating new standards around equity, to creating new standards around women in the workplace, to creating new standards around how you create change in your communities. I'm really proud of the work that Salesforce does around that, so much so that I sometimes forget that not everybody treats stuff like that. And where I continue to be like hopeful and zealous for us at Salesforce in particular, and working with nonprofits, is creating space for organizations to talk to each other. Because you know, I feel like I've had great conversations with individuals and organizations over the years about try this, try that. But like, the best work that I've ever been able to do is usually connecting people who can really learn from each other. And, you know, so like, I think space where you create convenings, and space where that means pulling together the commercial sector, the corporate, or excuse me, the public sector, nonprofits, like getting them all around the table at the same time, because it's going to take all of us to solve these big problems. Like, you asked me what the road to 2020, 2030 was like, and I still remember when I read the SDGs, I remember the Millennium Goals too, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, so much change has to happen for us to have progress around those things. And now we're 5 years in, and I still feel that way. So that's mine. But I'm super. Will you guys answer too? Like,
I'll answer if you want to answer first, Tim. I have my
Sure.
answers.
Yeah. Man, I mean, I have a lot. There's so much that you said there that I just completely agree with. And splitting, like, for me, it's different as CEO. Like, there's so much more alignment for me, and it's really helpful. But what I would say on it is that we need to. I think partners need to step up and actually own the middle space between platforms in a completely new way. And I think Salesforce, ironically, has written a playbook on this that is really amazing. I got invited to go sit in a room with competitors and find a neutral space that was actually dangerous to my business if it had gone wrong. And instead, what I found was every time I would participate, heard it, it was better for it. And I got inspired after talking with Keith Daniels, on why it matters, just to hear the perspective around that way of thinking for large brands. And I realized partners have been waiting for platforms to create that neutral space. And I think that we need to actually step up and say, this is the space. The reason for that is that the clock is ticking on 2020 or 2030 SDG goals. If I were to say the reason that we're not seeing very much effect on that is because right now, all of that's been treated as marketing. Because when you go to the site and you look at the global scoreboard on that, it's depressing. 5,000 projects, 3,000 of them are 2 years overdue. We all know those are not real numbers. And until we actually get past the nonprofit checkbox, in fact, and start looking at impact as a whole, and now I'm just like going full Brian Komar here, but until we start looking at impact as real, tangible work and we start measuring that, we can't turn it into a global symbol. So I want to make sure I'm saying it's not just about data science here.
Mm-hmm.
It is about creating symbols that have impact. And those symbols need to have enough rigor behind them so that people think they're real. And right now, we all just know those are aspirational. That's it. And they don't need to be. Those could actually be measurable by every organization that is working towards those. And so I think we need to get on it now to start seeing that global scoreboard start to emerge where we can see real numbers up there. So that's my thing. That's what we need to start working towards.
I just really love it. I love your leadership in this area around having this conversation through implementation. And I do, like I said, fortunately you're not alone in that walk, right? Like, but it's an important layer. Like and the holding, like, again, when stakeholder capitalism started becoming more, like the words that we use to label things sometimes are, but the ideas behind that, like that's some sexy stuff. That's really like,
absolutely,
super sexy.
And like, I worry sometimes about like, will we spend so much time trying to create the perfection of what those measures look like that we lose out on just pick something and organize around it so we make progress.
Yes.
So
that's the difference between symbol, which is what rallies people. And I think the fear I have is that M&E is they don't understand what actually motivates people is not accuracy. The power is not in the accuracy of the measurement. It's in the combined shared future of community. And you need enough to know like this is real movement, but you don't need it down to the, you don't need it down to the dollar. Anyway, I'm done. There you go. Thank you.
No, I like that. I like it a lot. Tracy?
All right, Tracy.
Crap. I was hoping you two would forget.
No way.
See,
the incentive to have this conversation is differing ideas.
One of the things about having these things is I can ask questions without having to answer them. Okay. I'm going to take a different tack on this. And you two can be horrified, shocked, or offended if you want me to, or if you want to, but I'm going to start really low level and build to a high level in my answer here. I think one of the things that really was the bane of my existence in Corporalandia, and remains as such, even if I'm working tangential with it now, is too much emphasis is being placed on making me personally as a corporate executive look good. Too much emphasis. I don't like what makes a corporate executive look good to me is not having to do stupid things like clean up my desk because they're walking through the office, which has been a request that was made of me at Salesforce. Or yes, that's another long story we'll get into someday. Or, make me the front end speaker for this department, this entity, this whatever, regardless of like my ability to do so, qualifications or experience in the field, when there are 1,000 other voices that could do that. And by the way, by showcasing the success and elevation of others, you as a leader will look better. And I hate that because I feel like that tendency drives way too many decisions in the corporate world across the entire technology industry. It drives me bonkers. That's the micro level. The macro level here is I would say for each of those buckets, there's a different responsibility, and it begins with something that both of you have already touched on, and that is we need to be talking together and we need to be acting together, because nonprofits as an industry don't have the power to facilitate that on their own without something giving it momentum behind them. So, the thing I would say about philanthropy, thank you. I am a little cynical on philanthropy. I will admit that. But the thing I will say about philanthropy is I need to see huge, ancient, and respected philanthropic institutions at the table with those business partners that Tim's talking about, getting a much better understanding of why, one, they need to fund this stuff, but two, why it doesn't always land. And three, creating space for nonprofits to say, hey, it didn't land, but here's all the things we learned and how we're going to do it different and better next time. Right. So that's the responsibility that I see needed there. Of platform companies, I need to see them talking about why data and data ownership, data privacy, data migration, and data interoperability is vital to the sustenance of the nonprofit ecosystem globally. I think business partners, Tim, your irk is my irk, and that is, I've worked at a few partners up to and including my own, where it's like, we're just going to scope this thing, we're going to get it done, and we're going to hand it off. And it's like, great, I built you a bus, but I never gave you a driver for that bus or a roadmap on like where that bus needs to stop to pick kids up. So all you're doing is like putting it in neutral and letting it coast down the hill. Right? No, that's the horrible trolley car problem that we try to avoid. And I think lastly, with nonprofits themselves, I feel like it's really super sticky and hard to have conversations about how we work and say we're going to solve this internally. So I think nonprofits are needing to look as an industry towards greater solutions around how do we make our operations efficient? How do we not duplicate services? And how do we work with each other? And that may be, of all of them, the most easiest one, because nonprofits are sort of de facto collaborative with each other until they're not, which is also really weird to me. And I think it's rooted in that ego thing that I started with. That's my
Yeah,
2 cents on all of that.
it's funny how there's a thread amongst all those ideas that
Yep.
you just went over, right? So like, and I think as you were saying, I want platform because I work for a platform company. When you say I want platform, like my immediate emotional response internally is, okay, are we doing that? And if we're not, then my next thought is, why don't we, or could we, right? Like, so as I think about those things, I think about like what I was trying to say and probably didn't eloquently say it around where I think the role of Salesforce is and where I push when I have a chance or when I can influence us to play more of a role. As I said, convening, but I also just think educating, right? Because in order for us to talk about data privacy, in order for us to talk about data strategy, for us to talk about data models, for us to talk about all those things, it means that the buyer, right, or the user has to be bringing those things up, or we have to have a space to bring them up in a way.
That's how the corporate world works everywhere.
Totally right.
Yep.
Or we have to have the space to be able to create those ideas through something that's of value that the nonprofit is trying to create, right? So like I like I said, like when I go to sleep at night, when I wake up in the morning, or if I can't sleep at night because I'm up thinking about it, like I don't want to work on things where folks are saying, "Oh, I felt like I have a data strategy because of Salesforce." I want them to have a strategy about how they're going to be better at their work, right?
Yeah.
Or how they're going to be able to be funded in a way that they're like, I don't have to worry about that, like individual giving is down. Like I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with folks about, can we just increase American giving as 2% of GDP to 3% of GDP? And every time I'm like, or can we just help them use the money that they already have better? And then I always come out on the side of, well, both are good. Like, let's give more money, but let's also make sure that the money that they have is, like that they're able to actually, do more good. I don't know. We need more money. We need more resources, but like all those things are good things to hope and long for platform companies to help with. But we also have to fix the problem of, and philanthropy plays a role in this, I think, actually. I've been excited or impressed by how many funders I've had conversations with over the last few years where the foundations or the funders are saying, how do you think we can help the nonprofit sector? that's great.
Yeah.
Like the Balmer Group has done some great things around helping
They
the
sure have.
sector
Yep.
because they're thinking through it like a commercial entity and a technology company. Anyways, yeah, all good stuff, guys.
I do want to say it's good to know that this stuff keeps all of us up. And I want to say
Mhm.
your options are you're excited about what keeps you up and it energizes you, or you can't sleep because you can't live with who you are. I would choose this keeps me up because I'm so engaged and excited about it. Now, as a business owner, I also sometimes can't sleep because of the normal small business stuff that comes up. But I just really don't sweat that stuff the same way, because what matters is the stuff that excites me and gets me out of bed in the morning. And Lori, I think we all have people who were like, okay, who are the, and I think you said coalition of the willing
Yeah.
at one point. And
Yeah.
I look around, I'm like, who are the players on the field here that I know are waking up early thinking about this stuff? And I'm sure you already know this, but you're in that bucket for us. And we're so grateful that you're in that bucket at Salesforce, and that Salesforce, like, this is not a weird fit. Like, this is what Salesforce is trying to do. It's really helpful. Yeah. We're really, really excited about the work that you do that, and really grateful for it as well.
To
Thank you for
every
that.
7 a.m. conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm going to be up at 7 o'clock anyways. I might as well be having coffee. Like I'm not like I grew up with a family that had a donut shop. Sleep you're not supposed to sleep. You're supposed to be up making the donuts. You're supposed to be up helping people like do something. So thank you, Tim. That was a really nice thing to say. I was very honored when you guys reached out, and also excited because I knew that you guys would ask questions that had me thinking like, how does that work? What would that be like? How would we do that? So like, and that's that's the benefit of doing this work, is there's no shortage of it to do. And it's still it still feels like the right stuff to be doing, at least for me.
Yep.
So, and I think for both of you as well, obviously.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. How much fun. Can we do this every Monday at
for sure,
whatever
right?
time it is?
We're going to have you back, Lori. I'm already looking at my scheduling. I'm going to have you back. Let's see. I'm going to try wrapping this up in a different way, because I think Tim and Lori, your last words are amazing. I'm just going to say, hey, folks, Why It Matters is part of Now It Matters. And we are burgeoning in both our listening ship, but also our approach. So if you like us, there's plenty of other videos here on this channel. Click the subscribe button somewhere. I'm going to point to it. I think I pointed everywhere. And really, thank you, everyone. Have a very, very safe and healthy end of 2020 and a joyful and optimistic beginning to 2021. And thank you, Lori, so much.
Thank you. Well said.